another Bears video discussing week 2, Bears versus the Texans. Not the outcome we were looking for, but we're going to get into week 3 preview as well with the Bears taking on the Colts. My name's Tyler. I'm joined alongside
Daniel. It's good to be back. Always is every week from now on until hopefully the Super Bowl and the Bears are playing.
Let's do it.
That's the goal for us this year.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's good to be back. I mean, every week there's new challenges, but this week we're facing a little bit greater of a challenge. And I mean by this week, talking about week 2, that was a bit of a troublesome week, but
yeah.
I don't know, Tyler. What do we think, man?
Week 2. Obviously, I was texting you right after that game was over. It was just I was a very unhappy Bears fan after that game. It's a hard game to kind of grasp. If you guys didn't know, obviously the final score of the game was 19-13. We did keep it a 6-point game. It was a one score game for for the Bears to take that game, but it just wasn't the offense's game once again. Just like week 1, the defense was spectacular, but the Bears offense just couldn't click once again. Well, I can't say there's pieces on the offense that could, obviously need bolstering. We'll talk about that O-line. Caleb didn't perform very well, obviously, but with all those pressures that the O-line was giving up, it was just not a good game for Caleb. It was just not a good game at all for the offensive line, but we'll get into it, right, Dan?
We'll definitely get into it. It's there's good and there's bad. Unfortunately, there's a little bit more bad than there was good. This game was very reminiscent of the average Bears game that we always watch, right? They keep it close. They give us one last drive, and then something tragic happens on the last drive usually. But it's just part of the way of football. It's part of the way the growing pains of having a rookie QB, which we're obviously totally used to a couple times in our lifetime. So let's get into it though. What started off with the downturn of the way this game started, starting with injuries, right?
Yeah, so basically, going into this game, there's question marks about all the receivers with the Bears. Well, some of the receivers, only 2 of them, Keenan Allen and Rome Odunze. Keenan Allen was questionable, and Keenan with a heel injury. Rome Odunze after getting hurt in week 1, trying to make a block with his knee. Luckily for Bears fans, we did get great news with Rome Odunze that it would be a week-to-week basis. We'll kind of play it out how it is. But right before the game started, Rome Odunze did take the practice field to see if he could play. He did end up, making the push to play, which he did do well for what the offensive line could kind of do for him. And Keenan Allen was out for that game. So Keenan Allen out, Rome Odunze in. So that means there's one receiver kind of, hole to kind of fill on that. But we kind of did see, we'll kind of go into the stats a little bit, who kind of filled in that void a little bit with Keenan Allen being out. But yeah, Keenan Allen was out for that game.
Yeah, and that was a bit of an opposite of what we originally thought. I really thought that Keenan was going to be in, Rome was going to be out. I think just like giving the rookie a little bit of time to feel comfortable, and then Keenan resting the entire week to play in a big Sunday night game was kind of what I thought was going to happen. This worries me a little bit more because it feels like a legitimate injury that Keenan is trying to deal with. It might not be a multiple week absence, but definitely hasn't been practicing for more than the 5 open practice days. But glad to see Rome was out there. Rome had the energy. Rome didn't feel like he had any setbacks. He didn't play most of the targets and stuff like that, or most of the snaps, but he definitely did produce in the moments when the ball came to his direction. So it was nice to see him out there.
Yeah, it was good to see Rome. The thing we were kind of looking at was after certain plays, would he be grimacing at his knee, or, kind of see what like his reaction was with running routes. He looked great out there. Rome looked like he wanted to be on that or obviously on that field, which he was, and he did perform pretty well for what, obviously what was kind of given to him. We'll go over the stats in a little bit, but so Rome did have to be basically the wide receiver 2 for Caleb Williams with Keenan's absence out. But once again in week 2, the defense did look spectacular. The defense looked great. There were some pieces on the defense that did kind of, I was texting you a little bit about it. Tyreek Stevenson, cornerback, did look like he was getting handled out there with Nico Collins. I'm not, disrespecting Tyreek Stevenson. Nico Collins is a great wide receiver for the Texans. He's basically the wide receiver 1 for the Texans right now. After 2 weeks, we already know who the wide receiver 1 is. That was kind of the question mark. If it's going to be Stephon Diggs coming in from the Bills, is it going to be Tank Dell? But we did find out, obviously, with the week 2, with how many yards he had and the touchdown and all the targets. Nico Collins is the clear wide receiver 1, and Tyreek Stevenson was taking the defensive, toll on guarding Nico Collins, which he was kind of getting torched out there, right, Dan?
He was. I mean, he definitely led over 100 yards to all receivers that were in his direction. I don't blame him because I think he was just being targeted. Yeah. Jalen Johnson also didn't have the most spectacular game, but I think it's just a piece of, Nico Collins is a big stud receiver. He kind of reminds me a little bit of Calvin Johnson. Yeah. Obviously not on the same pedestal as Calvin Johnson, but he's a big body receiver. He could definitely go for yards after catch. And I think that was one of the big issues that the Bears had, is that we didn't let a lot of yards after catch happen, and a lot of the passes that was attempted by Stroud, but it just fell apart because these passes would be quite long, to be 30 yards downfield, and then he would get it, run a few yards for a touchdown. So that's the one part, and we're going to talk a little bit about how these corners can kind of adjust coming up to this next week, because they also have a lot of good receivers, a lot of good arm talent. So we're going to go and take a look, but I think something else on the other side of the ball that also didn't perform well was obviously the offensive line, Tyler, right? I mean, you want to get us started on where do we even start with this, dude?
It was atrocious, Dan. It was absolutely terrible to watch. All the pressures Caleb Williams was taking, just certain plays that we were seeing on Twitter, Nate Davis just running past the person he was trying to block, and he looked like he was trying to go downfield to be a receiver. And it just I can't, say that everyone on the offensive line did terrible, but they are a group. They did all technically. If three of them do bad, that whole offensive line does bad. So that whole offensive line did look bad. Tevin Jenkins over 2 weeks is like the only person on this line that looks solidified and looks really well right now. But it's a team effort being an offensive line. It's not like being a receiver. Receiver, you kind of run your route and we'll see if you can torch the cornerback. But being an offensive line, you guys have to work together. You got to communicate together, figure out who's going to block. Coleman Shelton did up being the center during the game. He did not look good at all. Nate Davis looked absolutely terrible in week 2, with Ryan Bates being on IR now for 4 weeks with an injury. So it's just, and we'll talk about going into week 3 what Eberflus did just say today about what the line's going to look like going into week 3. But this line does need to, they have to communicate together. This has been basically the same line for about almost 2 years now. We have, new piece Darnell Wright on the line, who did not have a good game. Unfortunately, he did have a few false starts that kind of ruined the momentum in the offense. But there were, a few other, Nate Davis, obviously we talked about him 12 times. He's not performing well at all this team. He didn't even practice in the preseason. He just was kind of just sitting out. And this is with these receivers and stuff like that. You're looking at Jamar Chase right now. You got to practice in order to know how the flow of football is. You could be a veteran and you still got to practice. Keenan Allen was still practicing out there, but looking at, Nate Davis not even practicing whatsoever, it's clearly showing that he doesn't know what he's doing on the offensive line, right, Dan?
He's definitely, it's definitely troubling to see him play, because 2 games now, he's already got 2 memes of him kind of running around into open space and not even tackling anybody while there's 2 open defensive linemen, which proves that he's not the only piece of the puzzle that's, missing, that he's just not, he doesn't have the attention for it. And back to Darnell Wright, he was the one stud that we kind of, predicted to be a solid foundation of this offensive line. Unfortunately, this last game in week 2, he didn't have the best game of his career. I'm not going to call it the worst game, but it's arguably his worst game of his career, when he allowed 5 pressures, 2 sacks, and obviously a couple costly flags that were, after again and again on him in the same drive. So that was a bit bad. I'd call it a bit pathetic, just kind of the way that the offensive line works, especially in a primetime game. I'm so used to that. Every primetime game, it's always the idea of, dang, they can't get the run game started. The defense is holding on, but the offensive line's, crushing it. They're getting crushed, and then the QB can't get enough passes out because they're, we're just off to a slow start. But it was a bit bad for Darnell Wright, and I can't say Tevin Jenkins played that well. He did have the best grade on the offensive line, but we're talking more of a mid-grade next to a bunch of bad players. So it didn't look good. And I think this part, kind of showed why the other pieces were struggling as well. I'm not going to blame everything on the offensive line, but I think that's, again, the first thing you do to make sure that your receivers are getting the balls, your running backs are running through tackles and stuff like that. But it's got to get better. There's got to be some adjustments that can be made.
Yeah, it was kind of rough seeing how, going from the Bears game on Sunday Night Football, And then we looked at Monday Night Football with the Eagles taking on the Falcons and looking at how good that Eagles offense looked compared to our offensive line. It was just a polar opposite. And it was just not, it wasn't fun to, obviously watch, obviously a really good offensive line, with Saquon Barkley, he's, storming up the field. Then our offensive line can't even get the rush game going. It's got to get figured out. It really does. It's week 2. Luckily, it's week 2. And we kind of figured out now that this offensive line needs adjusting. But if it's in the middle of the season and it needs adjusting, let's say they perform well for 4 weeks. And then all of a sudden, for 3 weeks straight in the middle of the season, they just can't perform at all. Then I think it's better for it to fall apart right now in week 2 on a primetime game when everybody's, hounding them on Twitter saying, we have no idea what's going on with this offensive line. Even there's these reporters saying that this is the worst offensive line that I've seen in a long time. That's what this Bears offensive line needs right now. They need, people to tell them they're doing bad. They need to be, doing drills every day this week at practice.
Yes, they got to hear it. They got to hear. They got to. It's got to be open in the room, knowing that the worst piece of this team is the offensive line, and then not just kind of staring at the players and telling them, "Hey, you're bad, you're bad." More so, just saying whatever the work that's going on here hasn't been enough for the first 2 weeks, and people are noticing that aren't members of our team. Right? Other teams are noticing that, and that's just going to be a spell for disaster because that means every single week we're going to be kind of facing the same offensive and defensive lines, and it's just going to be bad. So Caleb obviously had a bit of a rough going when it came to the offensive line. I'm going to share this statistic first, just because I think this makes sense to show just before we get into the good and the bad of what happened. So here is stats that I have here by Marquee Bears on Twitter. Caleb Williams in a clean pocket versus Houston. He had a 76% of passes completed, 141 passing yards, and 0 interceptions. Caleb Williams under pressure versus Houston, 33% passes completed, 33 passing yards, and as we're going to talk about later in the show, 2 pretty costly interceptions. Yeah. So I think that just shows a lot on the idea of what the offensive line is actually risking for Caleb here. Yeah. If we can get anything more, that he's going to be completing 76% of passes, 141 yards. If this happened through all 4 quarters, I mean, gosh, he definitely would have hit benchmarks that we're wanting him to hit. And I think the offensive line is just kind of pushing him back just a little bit, the same way like we kind of did with Justin. So it's tough. It's tough. But I think that was a statistic that I wanted to say before we get to the idea of Caleb, and the issues that he faced.
Obviously, the NFL pressure is a lot different than the college pressure as well. When, these players are coming at you, especially 2 key players on the Texans offensive line that we talked about prior, Danielle Hunter and oh my God, Will Anderson Jr. I couldn't think of his name off the top of my head. 2 key, Will Anderson Jr. won defensive rookie of the year last year. Danielle Hunter got that huge contract coming from the Vikings to the Texans. They're pressuring him all day. And we saw when he has a clean pocket, he can stay in the pocket for a little long, which was only a few plays. He's going to perform pretty well. But when he's under pressure, starts to freak out a little bit, scramble, taking 7 sacks during the Texans game. Also 2 costly interceptions in tight coverage as well. But Caleb, let's kind of get into it. Just like the stats real quick. We're going to just go over basic stats on what there wasn't a whole lot about what, this offense did, kind of like week 1. But Williams did finish the game 23 of 37, throwing 174 yards. He rushed for 44 yards on 5 carries. So he, it's funny, he was the leading rusher for the Bears as well for the game. That's how you can tell about this offensive line.
And we're used to that, right? Last season we were used to that each game. Yeah, that's tough. It's definitely reminiscent of last year.
Yeah. But yeah, he was the leading rusher on both for either running backs or him. Also, he was the leading rusher in the game in general on both teams. He outran Joe Mixon. Obviously, he got hurt in I believe it was the 3rd quarter on a tackle from TJ Edwards. But yeah, Caleb Williams was the leading rusher in the game. So, but that's not what we were looking for.
Yes. Yeah. But
it's a good point that it's a Bears player instead of a Texans player. But is it a good point? In the point, this is kind of where we were getting away from with the Bears was, getting rid of Justin Fields for Caleb Williams so that he's not the leading rusher of the game and he's not going to get injured. But that offensive line couldn't hold up, and we needed him to, scramble out of the pocket and, do whatever. But DeAndre Swift, unfortunately, could not get the run game going whatsoever. He had 14 carries for 18 total yards on those carries, which is averaging 1.7 yards per carry. And his longest rush was a 7-yard rush. So Dan Swift couldn't get it going.
He couldn't get it going. He after the first 2 weeks, I will not be blaming him. I think the offensive line is definitely in need of some key adjustments, but he definitely should be a piece that's, getting a little bit of easier touches. It seems like we were kind of giving him some difficult touches. There was one pass where he just immediately got lit up 5 yards behind the line, and his eyes weren't even downfield yet. He was still looking for the pass. He definitely struggled with that. I think he just wasn't up to speed. He wasn't playing that quick. And we have a couple key adjustments later in our own eyes of what we can do to kind of help him in the running back room a little bit, get a little bit more of a grind going each game. Because we talked about right before week 2 that the most important thing for us was kind of getting the run game going. Because we think that kind of helps the Bears offense, without the struggles, it kind of helps Caleb, throw more passes, get more yards downfield, helps him make shorter drives. And we didn't see that at all. We actually saw it the same exact way. We saw a lot of 2nd and 11, 2nd and 13s, 1st and 15s off flags and stuff like that. So it was difficult to watch. Yeah.
The run game couldn't get going. We'll talk about it, obviously, just a little bit. Just why the run game couldn't get going. Shane Waldron kept calling these outside zone rushes to the left side, which Danielle Hunter was on, and Danielle Hunter was reading them. I forgot the other guy's name. I believe he was the safety. He just had an amazing game. He had so many tackles just because we're calling these outside, zone runs to the left side, and they're reading them and tackling them instantly. The only rush that I saw that worked really well with the Bears was what I believe that was the 7-yard rush, was an inside handoff rush to DeAndre Swift, and that was his longest carry of the game for 7 yards. And I'm like, oh my God, let's get this going. This is what the Bears need. No more outside because it takes too long to develop. Clearly, this offensive line can't block anything, but instead using those inside handoffs and let the running back use his legs to try to get past these blocks that are not being blocked. But yeah, rush game couldn't get going, unfortunately, but we'll dive more into that later with what they need to do in week 3 to potentially get that rush game going. And the lead receiver for the Bears during the game was DJ Moore. He had 6 receptions for a total of 55 yards. It wasn't a shocker that he was going to be the leading receiver. We got him for wide receiver 1 money. 55 total yards, and he had 10 targets on the day. So 4 of those passes did not end up going his way.
And he was a bright spot. I think every time he got the ball, he always got a good amount of yards after catch. He got most of the first downs that this offense, needed. So we didn't get a lot of other players that got many first downs, but he definitely was a lone bright spot. I think he was majorly upset too. As you can see, if you watch the game, he was visibly upset by the start of the second quarter. I just think he kind of expected to get a little bit more downfield work. And I think the frustration wasn't much with Caleb, but more so just the play calling and more so just the way that they were targeting him when he wasn't always fully open or when he wanted the ball most. So that was a bit tough, but I was a bit more excited to see our second wide receiver. So we had a couple of bets last week on who was going to be getting the wide receiver to, practice reps, or who was going to be, playing in the game reps as well, and who was going to be wide receiver 3. The second lead receiver we had was Rome Odunze with 33 yards on 2 receptions. His longest catch was a 27-yarder, and which was a pretty beautiful catch. I mean, they caught him right in stride downfield in the middle between the hashes, and he just kind of, booked it. So that was definitely a good play. That's something I could definitely see us leaning on in the future, is it definitely his speed. He had one crucial drop, which I'm sure everyone remembers. It was a crucial drop in the end zone that would have been Caleb's first passing touchdown, and that was in the first quarter. So that would have been extremely awesome to see. And if that came down, I'm sure we'd be talking a little bit differently about this game, because that would have given a little bit different momentum, but I'm sure the offensive line still would have lacked. That was a key drop, and I'm sure Caleb was upset the same way Rome's upset. So again, the stat line would have looked a little bit different, but I'm still happy the way that he played coming off of an injury. So I think he did pretty well. I expect a little bit, a couple more catches, but that one catch is kind of all I needed to see to know that, okay, he's healthy.
Yeah, unfortunately for Caleb, it's 2 weeks in a row where there's a receiver with a drop pass for a touchdown. But the good thing for that game was we did end up finding the end zone with the touchdown with Khalil Herbert on a rush, which was good. But it's about getting those passes off to the receivers. It was Keenan Allen in week 1, Rome Odunze in week 2. But Yeah, we got to execute those plays. It's on everybody. It's on the receivers, running the routes. It's on Caleb, making sure his passes are precise. And it's obviously about that offensive line holding him down so he can get a little bit more time to get maybe a better throw off. But also, we were trying to figure out, who potentially that wide receiver 3 would be if Keenan Allen or Rome Odunze was going to be out. It did seem like we did have a receiver that was kind of, Caleb, an option for Caleb. And it was DeAndre Carter, our, kickoff return man that we got from Seattle in the offseason. And Carter had 3 receptions for a total of 32 yards. And he did, he's becoming a good target for for Caleb, because we thought Tyler Scott would be filling in that, deep ball role / the wide receiver 4 role. It looks like it might be DeAndre Carter, right, Dan?
I agree. So I like the way that Carter plays. Obviously, he's the kick returner for the Bears currently. I think he's shifty, and I think he's got a lot of speed. Him being a smaller size, I think it's harder to guard him. So that's another reason why I think he got the most minutes this game. Mm-hmm. I think the secondary for this Texans team isn't incredible. So I think that's kind of the idea that they were trying to go with a little more shifty guys. Trust me, if I think Velus was in, I do think Velus would have eaten up a couple more of those minutes that Carter had. But I do see Carter staying in this kind of position in the future, especially if Keenan can't go this week or if we see another injury in the wide receiver spot. I like him. He's a bit of a veteran status, and he's someone that also played with like quarterbacks like Justin Herbert. So he understands the play of improvisation. That's something that Caleb's pretty good at. So I did like to see him. I mean, it wasn't an incredible stat line, right? He had only 3 receptions for 32 yards. But, right along the lines of Rome Odunze, like, it's just nice to see him out there catching balls and getting ready, because this is the more balls that he can catch is the better progression that Caleb can get in trusting his receiver. So if that's the way it has to be, then that's the way it has to be.
Yeah.
I wish we could have seen more Tyler Scott.
Yeah. He needs to get some playing time. We got him as a rookie. He used that deep ball threat in Cincinnati when he was in the college over there. I think he needs to get some more reps going in order to potentially. But DeAndre Carter is doing really well. So I'm not saying at least we don't have a wide receiver 4 out there, like maybe Velus Jones that's catching the ball or not catching the ball, and he's still in there even though he's not catching the ball, and at drop passes and stuff like that. But DeAndre Carter is filling in those shoes pretty well. But we need him to stay healthy for kickoff returns as well. We don't see a lot of teams out there where their receiver their kickoff returner is still the receiver. They usually just hold them for being kickoff returners. But there are some teams like we've seen with the Rams where Kyron Williams and Blake Corum, both the running backs, are playing a duty with punt and kickoff returns. But that's for another day. But so just kind of a few more offensive pieces we're talking about with week 1 that we didn't know how they perform in week 2. Cole Kmet did see some more action in week 2. He got targeted 5 times with 4 receptions. And then also DeAndre Swift was involved in the receiving game as well. He had 4 receptions for a total of 24 yards. So as we kind of were talking about those stats with the offense didn't have, DJ Moore didn't have 120 yards like Nico Collins did for the Texans. No one player on the offense did perform super well. So clearly this was not an offensive-minded game.
Of course, and they did target the tight ends more. I was excited to see him target Cole Kmet a little bit more, because even the commentators were saying, like, hey, this is a guy that they really want involved. This is a guy that they love here in Chicago. And so it was definitely interesting seeing other tight ends get more reps, but I think he is going to be, climbing the ladder more and more these next few weeks. Soon he'll be, a waiver addition, I'm sure, in fantasy leagues. Like, people are going to be wondering, where's he been at? So I definitely look forward to seeing that. But that's about all we got on the offensive side. We'll go more into what kind of adjustments can be made on the offensive side. But I think there's one bright spot we can talk about, Tyler, and that's always going to be the defense. So for the defense, what kind of statistics did we get from this last game?
Yeah, so the Monsters of Midway, the defense, did have a stellar week 2 once again, which was awesome for the Bears defense, because if the defense isn't performing well, I guarantee you these games will be 2-score, potentially 3-score games, but this Bears defense is not to be reckoned with, and they are doing really well. The leading tackler for the Bears in week 2 against the Texans was Tremaine Edmonds. He had 11 total tackles, 8 solo tackles, and he also had a sack on CJ Stroud as well. Now another person who performed really well, who we did have an off-season pickup, we got him from the Eagles, veteran presence, Kevin Byard. He performed really well as well. He had 11 total tackles. and he had 7 total tackle or solo tackles. I'm sorry, 7 solo tackles. And also, he did have a fumble recovery from a punch out by Andrew Billings on the goal line. So that was a huge recovery from Kevin Byard. Great mental awareness to find the ball and, secure the ball. Because, obviously, if that offense would have secured the ball past the goal line, that would have been, a touchdown for them.
Yeah,
so,
and that's what pretty much saved the game for us, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's the point of the game where it went from, okay, this is over to, okay, they're giving us one last shot, maybe like 2 last shots. So that was a nice, definitely move by the defense, because a goal line carry, like every time you see one of those fumbled, it's pretty rare. So you want to take advantage of those. Fortunately, we were not able to take advantage, but it's still nice that we have those opportunities there.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, there were a few Bears players that did have sacks during the game. Dan, do you know who those players were?
Yeah, I'm very excited about this. I think the Bears linebackers, as you can tell, have been, just sturdy players. I watched tape on them on Twitter of a guy who was just saying these linebackers are just the best trained year after year. They resemble a lot of, past Bears players. So we had players like that got sacks on C.J. Stroud. So obviously Tremaine Edmonds, Jack Sanborn was another name. I think those two playing together really just studs. And T.J. Edwards got a lot of nice tackles there. And, one of the newer guys, Javon Dexter, who was a rookie last year, he's definitely making a name for himself, right? He's got, I think he had a 0.5 sack last week, a half sack.
I believe so as well, yeah.
And then he had a sack this week. So he is definitely getting his presence felt. Yep. He's rushing the passer a lot, and he's got the energy. I think him and Sweat definitely have created a nice relationship there in the defensive line. So I'm really happy for the kid. I think he's really he's killing it, and I'm excited to see Zach Pickens. Obviously, will be attending hopefully soon. He's also still on the injury report here and there, but that's just another one of those defensive pieces that we get in some of the later rounds that he is definitely making a name for himself here.
Yeah, Jack Sanborn also almost had a interception in that game. That was, I believe, there was a huge play that Jack Sanborn almost got that. That would have been, a huge defensive turnaround. But obviously, with this offense and that offensive line, we're not sure even how that would have performed. We kind of talk about, defense potentially getting, an interception, a fumble, whatever could flip that offensive switch. But it just didn't seem like with the offense, with the Bears for week 2, especially with that offensive line, that they would potentially, secure anything. It could have been a field goal, but I'm not sure about a touchdown just for week 2 yet. It just seemed a little rattled on a Sunday Night Football. But yeah, now the last, stats with some players, special teams has been key piece for the Bears, but last year as well. Them gain a lot of field goals, when we couldn't secure the, a red zone target with a touchdown. DeAndre Carter did take 2 kickoff returns for a total of 50 yards, his longest being a 26-yard return. Cairo Santos went 2 for 2 on field goals, his longest being a 54-yarder. And he did also nail an extra point after that touchdown from Khalil Herbert. And then also Torrey Taylor, once again, had a great game, but these are the words I don't want to keep repeating. Torrey Taylor having a great game. That means we're punting the ball a lot, and that means the offense can't stay on the field. He did punt the ball 6 times for a total of 284 punting yards, and then 2 of those punts were inside of the 20, and his longest punt was a 57-yard punt.
Yeah, he played excellent. Torrey Taylor, we can always expect him to play well. He is somewhat of veteran status, the amount of balls that he kicked in Iowa. So we can kind of expect him to never have a bad game. He played out of his mind. So I do enjoy watching him punt once in a while, because you always get that feeling. It's like, okay, if he gets it inside the 5-yard line, like, we're getting this ball right back. So it's definitely a good idea to have him, have him be the punter, have him keep punting balls. But there was one player specifically that I just got super excited about, especially when it came to special teams, and that's rookie Austin Booker. So he plays on the defensive line when it comes to field goals and and punts and stuff like that. So he almost came inches away from blocking one of the 56-yard field goals of Kaimi Fairbairn. So he came extremely close, and it was one of those field goals that if he went ahead and blocked that ball, we're getting that ball, and we're getting that ball at the 50-yard line. So that would have been an insane block if he did have.
It was a great play by him. It was really athletic play. He jumped right over the defensive lineman, and he was really close to blocking that. Great props to you, Austin Booker, for doing well on that. Yeah,
I just think he's still that rookie experience where he jumped the line and then didn't know where to look, didn't know where to kind of face his eyes to the ball. So he came really close. If he did have his eyes on the ball, he would have blocked that punt. But there's just another, one of those solid foundation pieces that's definitely, making a name known on the special teams, and he's a contributor. So we're very excited to see where he plays and fits along in the future.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
But yeah,
Special teams once again, did do pretty well.
Yeah.
Just to I know we wrote down a lot of facts here, talking about the game. I just wanted to go over just a few plays the Bears had that did look pretty well, and like a few flops that the Bears had during the game. So they did elect to defer, so they did get the ball at halftime. The Bears did a really good job that first offensive drive by holding the Texans to just a field goal, and then the Bears first offensive drive, that was a great offensive drive, right, Dan?
It looked good. I mean, we looked definitely. Caleb looked there. Caleb looked ready, and he looked
very calm and collected. Yeah, he did.
His attention was there. I think when you look at a passing chart of this previous game, there were a lot of close passes, but he was completing his passes. I mean, he started the game 9 for 9, so he definitely had that energy. He had that confidence, and he was hitting his targets. They weren't long passes, which I think is something that we're going to talk about further into the future and like different games in different weeks, maybe even starting this week. But it was nice to see him feel comfortable.
Yeah. Yeah, on that first offensive drive, the Bears couldn't unfortunately get a touchdown on that drive, but we did settle for a field goal, so we did tie the ball game since the Texans did get a field goal on that first drive, 3-3. But yeah, that unfortunately was like pretty much the best offensive drive for the Bears, besides the touchdown that we'll talk about in a few plays. The Texans on that very next drive did have a huge offensive drive with basically Nico Collins being the star aspect to that. He did have a huge unnecessary roughness penalty when he was bickering with Tyreek Stevenson when he was guarding him. But that very next play, there was a 28-yard pass to Nico Collins for a touchdown. So the Texans did score. That put him on top 10-3 at that point. But yeah, the Bears at that point just punted the ball back and forth, held the Texans a little bit. And then the next drive, when the Bears got that ball back, they did rally to score on that next offensive drive, which was awesome. Big key part to that, though, was that they did have the Texans did have a defensive pass interference called on them on a play by DeAndre Carter, where there was a hold on that defensive pass interference. That was a 26-yard pass interference to basically get us set up in the red zone, which was great for the Bears. Gain a little bit more momentum on our side, especially when the offensive line is holding up. That's all we pray for, is that we get flags to go our way. That's kind of the only way we can get the offensive rolling if the offensive line can't even hold up Caleb.
And that's a confidence thing, right? Because once you get a team into the end zone like that, into the red zone, it was the first red zone trip for this offense. Was that after that defensive penalty? So that isn't the most beautiful way to get into the red zone for us, but I think it's something that we'll take. I was really excited just to see Caleb operate in there, because the commentators were talking about how hard it is, how it's a completely different defensive system, how you're playing with such shorter passes but such longer strides. So it was definitely interesting to watch, and it ended well. I think getting a score on that red zone drive was definitely important for us.
Yeah, I agree. That was a huge offensive drive for the Bears. Obviously, that what's called that unnecessary roughness flag did get us some momentum going, and then we did settle. We did talk about this earlier. Rome Odunze did have a pass that just went right off the fingertips. It was in my opinion, it was a perfect pass from Caleb Williams. It was where it needed to be, so it did not be intercepted. Rome just couldn't come down with that ball. It did tip out of the fingertips, but we did on that very next play. Khalil Herbert did end up running it into the end zone for a Bears touchdown. And unfortunately for the Bears, that was pretty much like all of the scoring that we kind of saw. Touchdown aspect. We did have a field goal later on in the second half. But yeah, the halftime score was 16-10. The Bears did elect to defer, so they get the ball at second half. But like I said, the second half game log for the Bears did not look too pleasing at all. I'll just go over it. It was a punt, followed by another punt, followed by one more punt, and then an interception by Caleb Williams. The next drive after that, it was another interception by Caleb Williams. Guess what, Dan? Another punt.
Oh.
And then, but the next drive after that, what do you think it was?
We scored, didn't we?
We did get a field goal. That's right. We got a field goal. Thank God for the Bears getting a field goal there. Gain some pressure off the offensive. Finally, like we need to score there. Yeah. And then we did get a turnover or downs. That was pretty much the last drive of the game for the Bears. We did have on fourth. Caleb did get sacked, take a turnover on downs. Bears lost the game 19-13. And I know as soon as I saw the sack, I immediately had my remote control and I went, okay, there's none more for me to watch. I don't want to hear the commentators talking about how Caleb did nothing during the game. Well, Chris Collinsworth was praising Caleb that whole entire game. I know me and our buddies were kind of, saying, why is this guy, praising him when he's taking all these sacks? But that's just Chris Collinsworth always, talking about great quarterbacks and stuff like that. But it was I needed to turn that game off right away. I didn't even open up Twitter. I knew what was Twitter. Caleb Williams was number one trending on Twitter. I knew what all these people were going to say. I just had to let it sit for a day. I know I immediately texted you and I said, dude, I can't take this anymore, right?
Because we needed somebody to kind of talk to it, talk through it and just kind of understand what it is we just watched. Because we always, have conversations after these type of games, especially last year. Every single bad game, which was every other week, but it definitely was a head scratcher. I think a lot of the coaching issues that we're going to get into just was difficult to watch. And I think the next thing we're going to talk about here is Matt Eberflus and the questionable challenge calls he had. I think it just felt like another match where we couldn't trust any level of the offense or coaching, defense was still there, but defense was letting big plays happen. So it was just a bit troublesome because who could we trust again? Yeah. And that just felt like the defense. And so it was tough to be in that position, especially looking at the coach and saying, hey, like, I thought everything was okay leading into week 2. I thought we had, everything figured out, no more rookie troubles, but we can't think of this way too early. It's still week 2, which everyone's going to say every single year until the NFL no longer exists, right? It's always it's only week 2, but a lot of things happen, and so
the Bears
Texans did have their team rolling.
The Bears obviously, but just kind of you brushed over a little bit. Matt Eberflus having those few questionable challenge calls, especially when you're on a primetime game. You better have those challenge calls. Obviously, you challenge the call because you don't know it's right, but the first challenge call he had was he thought it was a questionable catch by Stephon Diggs. And the thing that just sucked, it was right in front of him. It was right in front of him, Dan. And even the replays showed Matty Eberflus looking at, Stephon Diggs' feet down. And he's like, okay, yeah, he's clearly down. But I saw the challenge flag go out and I'm like, don't tell me. Don't tell me.
You always have to save at least one for the first quarter.
Right? I hate to say the name that reminds me of, but it's our previous head coach. Mm-hmm. It is. On people on Twitter basically saying, why is he challenging these calls? Why we're kind of getting a little, like, I'm not saying he's the exact same person, but it's kind of the copy and paste of what Matt Nagy used to do on challenge calls because he thought he was right. But then the other challenge call, I personally don't blame Eberflus for this challenge call. Yeah, you can kind of blame him a little bit for that challenge call. It was there was a bobbled interception by Kyler Gordon on the defense. It was such a close play, but when those plays happen, especially afterwards, Kyler Gordon tells Eberflus, challenge it. We need to challenge this. You gotta look at your coaches first. Don't look at the player first. Look at the coaches and be like. Let's do if we can do a quick review up in the booth or I'm sorry, with our coaches up in the, the press box or whatever, before we do the official challenge. Eberflus listened to Kyler Gordon's words. And like I was texting in the group chat, don't ever listen to the players' words. It's just like basketball. When we're watching, a basketball, all these players always think it's either it's not a goaltender or whatever. Challenge the call. Don't listen to the player that is involved with the play because they always think they're right.
Exactly. They didn't see it from all sides. And I know Flus did mention a little bit that he trusts the way that his crew kind of goes through challenges and goes through these progressions of understanding, who has the ball at what exact moment. I was just a bit upset with how quick he got rid of these. It was still a close game, but it was still the type of game where I think he just needed to put more focus on how the team was playing rather than trying to win back plays and win back yards. It was, I think you say those type of things for the end. We didn't see many plays where they, needed challenges. So I think he, at the end of the day, it's fine. He did challenge in the 2 most controversial plays of the game, but it was just a bit ridiculous because first of all, one being in front of him, the second one I think I'll talk about a little bit later in the game. The players that are making these plays are players that you can usually trust they're going to make that play, right? They're going to get both feet in. They're going to get full security of the ball. And so I think that was the other thing where I was like, Flus, maybe sometimes you have to trust that a player like Stephon Diggs is going to try his hardest to get both feet in if that's what you're so worried about, if you're very 50-50 on the fence on whether that's a completion or not. So that was just a bit of a problem.
Yeah, unfortunately for the Bears, they were out of challenges with 4 minutes to let go in the third quarter, which is not a good time to be out of challenges. We challenged in the first half, did lose a timeout because of that, and then we did challenge in the second half, losing another timeout, and we were out of challenges with 4 minutes to let go in the third quarter. They say the fourth quarter before that 2 minutes is the most crucial time to have those challenges. So it was not good for the Bears to not have challenges right there. But that's pretty much wrap up of week 2 just with the stats and kind of went down during the game. Before we wrap up week 2, we're going to kind of just go into some positives and negatives with what the Bears kind of did. Number one positive for me, I know I've boasted about it for now 2 weeks in a row. The defense was stellar once again for the Bears, which the Bears did need that defense to be stellar. It was we kept it, and also another positive, like I talked about before, we did keep it a 1-score game against a top 5 team projected to go to the Super Bowl. So those are 2 positives for the Bears. They did really, the defense just performed well once again. We got a fumble. We we held them to 19 points, which was really good, for a team that usually can sometimes get 40 points a game. But then, we did, obviously it's the defense did perform really well. The offense just couldn't click.
Yeah, I think.
Do you have any? Do you have any few positives? Like just like, I know.
Just the one positive I have, I think, is just the adjustments that the team made for offense heading in from week 1 to week 2. They understood that Caleb didn't get enough passes out. He didn't get enough easy completion. So I think in the first 2 quarters they did help Caleb with that. Him going 9 for 9, him having at least 15 passes, 15 completions in the first half. I think that was an important thing because it's getting him more comfortable in the early game process, because it's not just a fourth quarter game. This is a game that you can win in the first quarter if your team is really like stellar, if your team's really kicking it. But I think that was the one thing that I think was a bit of a positive, was kind of the assurance that like, hey, Caleb isn't going to have a bad game, a bad stretch from the last quarter that he played, whether it was a fourth quarter. But I think that was important for me to see. I think that's the only positive. I think after that, after the second half, it looked pretty bad. It looked pretty abysmal. But mainly just negatives for this team. The first negative that we can kind of go over, Tyler, is we both understand the same way that the defense is the most stellar part. The line that we have on defense, the line that we have on offense is probably the most disgusting. It's probably the worst part. And so that was a huge negative. That is something that I think there must be adjustments. And if it's not adjusting the players and their names, it has to be adjusting, the positions and who's switching to what spot and who has the better energy and who's showing up to practice. So it's just that sucks. It sucks because we talked about offensive line for so many years now. So that was definitely a negative.
This is something we gotta stop bringing up, man. It's not obviously our faults, but this is something that we just can't, keep going, get back into the Bears offensive line. It's just we want to get over that hump. That's what we need to talk about. Is just we can't keep, talking about how the quarterback's not protected once again for another year. We can't have that. Like, we need comfortability with these quarterbacks in the pocket. And it's big. So just kind of going over the offensive line stats I was reading on Twitter. The Bears O-line is the largest pressure percentage in the whole entire league, which is bad. You don't want your quarterback to be pressured. It's 10% worse than the second most pressured team in the league. That's how bad it is. So and they allowed 13 pressures on the quarterback in 2 games. And just like what happened in week 2, penalties are killing them. Darnell Wright had 2 false start penalties. They need to, be hitting the field more than everybody on offense has to be hitting the field. I'm not just saying the offensive line. Caleb has to be hitting that practice field more. The receivers have to be as well. The offense is a big team. Not just we can't just separate it into we can't just separate it into O-line, receivers, running backs, whatever. The offense is one piece. The defense is one piece. That offense needs to work together. Caleb needs to hound them and be like, dude, I need to be protected. So that's what we need this week, Dan. We need them to be on the same page.
Definitely. So I think that's the first step, is just kind of knowing that Caleb will get more completions with him having a clean pocket. The more he's running around, the more mobile he is. I think it's a little bit more. We can kind of guess that he's going to throw some interceptions, going to have some incompletions. So keeping that line straight, keeping that line fresh will definitely ensure him having a cleaner game. The same way I said that there was a positive for Caleb playing in the first half and getting his completion percentage up a little bit. He was definitely a big part of the negatives, I'd say. I think Caleb's confidence was a bit rough. The same way that you always hate seeing rookies when they're covered in mud, they're crying, they're upset that in the third quarter they're already being sacked 10 times. We saw very similar kind of phases in Justin last year when in a couple games. So that was definitely rough to see. So you want to see a guy like that being the stud, being the main guy, being the guy that's in and out of the locker rooms, saying the first thoughts on his mind, just kind of letting people know that he's in charge still, letting people know
Yeah.
that he's confident and he's ready and he's apologetic for the way that he played. Definitely in the game, I could kind of tell that he was upset and that he wasn't, he just wasn't communicating with people. He was just kind of upset at himself. And to a certain point, it must stop being about you. It has to start being about the team as a whole. And not saying that he's selfish, but definitely it showed a little bit that he was so upset with himself that it started to show into other players. As you saw with DJ Moore getting very frustrated, and we didn't know if it was exactly at Caleb, but it's that kind of frustration where even in a one-score game like this, the Bears just felt defeated by halftime. Like it just felt like they had no other chances and no other shots or opportunities. So Caleb's confidence was definitely a pretty big negative for me.
Yeah, I agree with that. It starts with the quarterback under center, and obviously the people protecting him around that. It sucks seeing that, the comparing pictures with, Fields on the, bench last season, and then, Caleb just looking so defeated on the bench last season. Luckily, it's only week 2. It's not week 17 where he's making those faces and where we have a, if we did have a negative record or whatever, but Caleb's confidence needs to, be up a little bit. People are now comparing, did the Bears make the mistake with not drafting Jaden Daniels in his thing? But Jaden Daniels doesn't even have, a win under his belt yet. So it's just the O-line. If this O-line was, secure in holding Caleb down and he's still not performing well, yes, then we can have these discussions. But when he's scrambling for his life, just like Fields was last year, and, he's not faster than Fields, so he can't escape the pocket as fast as Justin Fields, but he does have a better arm and better accuracy than Justin Fields. But it's just, we got to see him more comfortable, and he's not comfortable right now.
I will say Jaden Daniels did get his first win this week.
Oh, that's right.
If you know the stat that the Giants scored first game ever where they scored 3 touchdowns and still lost to a team that didn't score a single touchdown. So Jaden Daniels did get his first win, but I think the one big stat that we also have to remember is that not a single rookie QB in this draft class has thrown a touchdown yet.
Yeah.
So I think that's just one of those other ups and downs. Jaden Daniels is playing well, but he's playing well with his legs, and he's not really confident in his arm yet. So that's just one of those other moments that it's the Bears aren't the only team that are kind of struggling with their rookie QB. It's more so just trying to see who figures it out first, right?
Yeah, I knew it was something with him. I thought it was I thought he got a win, but I was like, there's something he hasn't done yet. I was throwing a passing touchdown. That's what it was. Yeah. So, that's pretty much wrapping up week 2. It was not a great week for the Bears. They just obviously the defense was stellar. The offense once again was blah, but just kind of going into, we obviously talked about everything that went in with the offense not performing well, the defense not performing, or the defense, performing very well as well. But now, Dan, let's just, so we don't separate it into 2 podcasts. We're at 47 minutes right now. We can probably do this in about, 13 minutes going into week 3, just because there's not too much change. Week 3, the Bears are going to be taking on the Colts in Indianapolis, which is a tough place to play at Lucas Oil. It really is. So what do you think, Dan? What do you think it's going to happen for week 3?
So I'm excited. I think this is going to be another good game for Caleb and trying to make some adjustments and trying to just get the offense better on the same page. I think this is one of those teams that isn't the strongest. They have a lot of presence on offense, but hey, let's remember that our head coach used to be the defensive coordinator of this team, so he can kind of understand the scheme and the way that some of these players still do adjust to certain play styles, like Caleb Williams. But I will say the one thing is DeForest Buckner is not playing. He has been headed to
huge
IR.
Piece for the Colts out. Huge.
He is technically a Danielle Hunter not playing for us versus the Texans. So I think that's a big thing for Caleb when it comes to the offensive line not having so many pressures and not struggling so much. Definitely still have to take care of the football and take care of the way that he's going to be throwing the ball. But like Todd said earlier, it's going to be a noon game, noon central. The Colts just came off. They're coming in as slight favorites, even after their rough loss to the Packers, which if any of you saw that game, they did not have any offense. They looked worse than the Bears did. So we're kind of hoping for a similar kind of adjustment, that the fact that they're playing at home and maybe the fact that Caleb is also going to be playing in a indoor stadium, kind of similar to the last game, that he's just going to have a little more energy and kind of, that confidence level is going to be up again, knowing that the defense isn't as strong as it was in Houston. And even then versus Houston, it still was a 1-score game. So, but let's kind of take a look here. We're not going to take up too much time, but what are some key adjustments do you think the Bears can make to look just better? That's it. It doesn't mean to win the game. Let's just say, what can they do to look a little bit better? So the first one I'm seeing all over the place. I'm just going to mention it because I'm sure you've seen it as well. We know for a fact now that this won't be happening because Flus did kind of come out with a report saying that he will not be making any adjustments to the offensive line. They're just going to be kind of working with the pieces they have, knowing that there's a lot of injuries going around. But most people were talking about, and this is even including former offensive linemen for the Bears on Twitter, saying to move Tevin Jenkins to right guard in replace of Nate Davis and bring in rookie Kieran Amagaji at left guard, Hinsdale native. So I think I like the idea of Kieran playing because he's just younger. He's got a little more energy, and I think he's got a moment to prove himself to his QB, which is, I think, it could be painful, it could be risky, but it could also be overly worth it. And I think he's had enough practice reps, and he looked pretty good in the preseason because he was coming off an injury, but he I think looked pretty good. So that was just one thing that everyone was talking about. When it comes to if we have to make an adjustment to the offensive line, that's exactly what they're going to be doing. Like, I think there's not many options we have until Ryan Bates comes back from injured reserve. But go ahead, Tyler. Let me know what else you think, what kind of adjustments we got.
Yeah, so I think, a big adjustment for the Bears needs to be a little bit in the running game. We saw in week 2 with the Texans, basically I talked about it earlier, just these outside sweep runs to, DeAndre Swift, and they're just not working. Either he's getting stuffed up -1 yards, maybe he's getting a 1-yard gain, but it's just not it. Let's try to utilize the inside handoffs a little bit more, just because these offensive linemen we've been seeing just can't get to the spots on blocking quick enough. The safety for the Texans in week 2 was outbeating the linemen getting to where they needed to be. So I think the running backs need to get the game going a little bit, even if it's not Swift. Let's get Khalil Herbert some more. Some more carries. I know I said DeAndre Swift was, is a huge addition. Obviously we paid him big money to be here, but if he can't get going, it's the next man up, Khalil Herbert, next man up after that, Travis Homer, and next man up after that. Hasn't even seen a touch yet, Roshan Johnson, but he did see a punch in week 2. So
why? Yeah, why? Also, nothing from the NFL office yet regarding that situation, which I don't like thinking about it too much because it hurts. It really does, because I feel like we deserve something from that, some sort of recognition, rather than just being like, it never happened. Well, that never happened. That's a bit ridiculous coming from the NFL refs there, but hopefully something in the future.
Yeah, now with this, I think with this offense, Dan, we let's get them rolling a little bit. Let's get some design plays of Caleb Williams, even if it's not a pass, maybe it's a run play. We saw what he could do in week 1, with his legs, gain 10 yards, maybe 15-yard gain. Obviously he's not a Justin Fields caliber with a 4.4, 40, but he can, get the game going pretty quick with his arm or with, I think we need to see some more design play action passes. If that offensive line can hold up. If that offensive line can't hold up, then we just got to bail from that completely, because it's just going to be an immediate sack with these play action passes taking a little bit too long.
Exactly. So I love exactly what you said about the running game. I think getting the running game off early to an early start and just kind of spreading the love, dude. I think this is a team that, again, led the league in rush yards per game last year. And even with a rushing quarterback like Justin, it doesn't mean that Caleb, who probably would get less rush yards, can't play in the similar play style. I think it's just kind of, giving a little bit more juice to the offense and making teams be like, okay, this offense isn't let's score 10 points a game. It's okay, they got solid running backs and wide receivers that can catch every pass thrown to them. So that's something that I thought was big. I think another thing, and this is kind of number 5 on the list of 5 things that we have for what key adjustments the Bears can make to just ensure a better game, is, I think the offensive play calling could be a little bit more daring. I think they went well with Caleb being soft, throwing it to the, under 10 yards and trying to get as many completions as possible. I think we saw that happen, and he can toss the ball on every level. We saw in the preseason as well. I just want to see him play with a little bit more confidence. It seemed like this game they played fearfully, and he just played kind of slow. And that was also a part of the offensive line, but I think he also still made mistakes playing fearfully. I would like to see him do, a couple more design passes, like you said, a couple play action passes, just kind of getting him into a rhythm when it comes to playing off the ball and playing, in an offense that's kind of more, just a little bit more random, like kind of tossing it to random players and stuff like that. Completions is still important, but I want to see him, use his arm. I want to see him use his arm for the plet's were designed to catch these balls. So I have written down here, let him cook. Now, we said this a million times last year with Justin, right? Let him cook, let him use his legs, let's see his arm. I think this is the game that we kind of see that a little bit more. I think it's just important to see Caleb, comfortable. Like we always say that each game. He felt comfortable in the first half. Let's see that in both halves now. But now let's see him kind of spread out the playbook. Let's see him kind of, toss into the secondary. Let's see that.
Yeah, I agree. Caleb, we need to get him going in week 3 against the Colts, especially with DeForest Buckner not out there, getting pressure, on the offensive line to Caleb. We need to see what this offense can do a little bit more. I saw what Shane Waldron did in Seattle. We all saw that with how he got Geno to become a great passer, and we saw how that offense looked. With Geno under center, and he's not. Shane Waldron came over from Seattle to basically get this passing game going. Luke Getsy didn't do it last year, but now it sucks seeing him, kind of perform kind of well with the Raiders, getting that win over, the Ravens in week 2. But let's get Shane Waldron. Let's like you said, let's spice it up a little bit with these plays. I think that would be big for the Bears.
Definitely. So here are a few things. I know we don't have much time left, but we're going to go through these as quickly as possible. So what other things do we think adjustments can the Bears make to kind of ensure a better game, but also the win, right? Also trying to win the game, also get us back to a winning record in 2-1. I think the first thing I've written down here was that Anthony Richardson has an arm and is fast. He's as a QB kind of player that we haven't played yet, especially this defense, seeing how acclimated they get to that. I think the Bears defense needs to kind of play ahead of the snap. We saw last week how a lot of the receivers got the ball early, but then kind of ran it for yards after catch. So how many yards after catch that they received. And so I think that was important to see, especially this upcoming game. They are throwing 50-yard touchdowns, 60-yard touchdowns, 70-yard touchdowns. Let's try and see if we could stay a step ahead of that and trying to get them to, turn over the ball a little bit more. We also have an idea on DJ Moore and Caleb need to build a stronger relationship because last week they looked defeated very early in the game. And I think their relationship is a bit burnt after that game because DJ obviously wanted the ball more. He got 10 targets, which is, partly half Caleb, half DJ's fault. But I think they need to definitely get on the same page, especially this week.
Yeah, I agree. I agree that obviously these keys pieces, DJ Moore as well needs to get going with this offense. He's the one, he's the wide receiver 1 right now. They need to get on the same pace together. They look like they didn't even want to talk to each other on the bench yesterday just because they both looked defeated, like you said. So let's get them rolling. Like that's what we need for week 3 against the Colts. And like you said, with Anthony Richardson having an arm and trying to throw, I think he's going to be daring with some of these passes, trying to get deep down the field, maybe with Alec Pierce, maybe with Michael Pittman. Bears defense, we can see 2 interceptions out of them. I think he's going to throw some daring tight coverage passes. And, Jalen Johnson, I could see get a pick. Also, who I think could get a pick is Kyler Gordon this week. He's going to get the revenge pick from week 2. So
yeah, I could see that. So here are some players. Obviously, we're going to go over some current statuses of some of the players going into week 3. Obviously, since week 3 is a noon game, that means that there's no extra time. There's no extra timetable. There's no Thursday night games. So everyone is going to be back to the schedule that we have. I think it's a little bit nicer again that we just have another week of practice and another week of training for some of these injured players, just to kind of get them back into a rhythm. Obviously, today, Keenan Allen with a heel injury did not practice today still. Left guard Tevin Jenkins with a deep thigh bruise. He also didn't practice. We got the fullback Kyrie Blasingame, and then defensive tackle, like we mentioned earlier, Zach Pickens' groin is still not practicing. So that's those are some names that we want to see on the team because I think they're contributors. Zach Pickens, I'd be very excited. We talked to him several times, so I think that is a player that we should be looking out for this week to try and make a return. Hopefully, it is Wednesday today. We're recording this on Wednesday, so we're going to let you know kind of tomorrow what kind of updates we get from a lot of these players. But hopefully by next week we'll have some better news on who's starting and who isn't. Yeah.
And also, there's another key information that came out today on Twitter is that Matt Pryor will practice in left guard today, but Matt Eberflus, like we said before, did say that there's going to be no changes to the line. The line's going to stay the same, just like week 2. So, let's get this line working together. Let's get them on the same page. They did look defeated last week, and they were defeated because they were they gave up 7 sacks to Caleb Williams. They're the most pressured O-line. Let's get this train rolling a little bit. Let's try to get these, let these, people on Twitter, let's try to let them eat their own words. Just because, I know the offensive line isn't good right now. The offensive line is good right now, but it could turn around. You never know. They didn't look terrible toward the end of last season. It's pretty much the same exact offensive line.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
even if it means, changing a few key pieces, like you said, Karan Amajabi, a few other people as well. Let's try to get these guys suited in. We got him in the third round for a reason. He's a big rookie. Third or fifth round, I forgot, but yeah.
Yeah.
So Dan, I know you texted me about this. You were really excited about this.
Was very excited.
This is a fun game that Dan came up with, which he always comes up with interesting things. In this game, we like to title Bear Down or Bear Frown.
Bear down or bear frown, as you can see below here. So just to kind of make things interesting, usually this year we're going to take a big approach on going through the numbers, going through like the projections of a lot of these players and kind of going up and down, yes or no. So I wanted to make a little game so each week we can kind of have a different level to it. And we're just going to start off with 4 or 5 stats that aren't necessarily numbers or projections that were given to by sports betting books or anything like that. Usually the things that we're going to come up with assigned by these kind of projections given by analysts. So let's go ahead with the first one. So bear down means it hits and you're excited. Bear frown means it does not hit and we are not excited. So we are not expecting that to happen. So let's start off with the first one here. Bear down or bear frown, the Bears will score over 21.5 points in week 3.
This is a tough one. Obviously there's one way I like to go about this, but just with the way they performed in week 2, I'm gonna be positive with this. I'm gonna say bear down on this one. Bear down.
Bear down.
I think this defense is gonna, get a few turnovers, maybe potentially on when the Colts are still on their side of the field. We'll get 2 key touchdowns, which will already give us 14 points. And I think we'll get a few field goals on top of that as well. I think they'll get us over the 21.5. I'm going to say bear down with this one, Dan. How about you?
Bear down. I think I'm also going to go bear down. I think this is a game that's going to be a little bit different for this offense. Obviously, each week we're sitting here talking about how this is the week it's going to happen. They're going to make new strides. I do think this is the week that happens for Caleb. I do think he kind of finds a better rhythm. He doesn't play a game that looks like a rookie. He plays a game that looks like a starting quarterback. And so, yes, I do think we hit the over on 21.5. So now on to the next one, Todd. You want to go ahead and start?
Yeah, next one. I kind of, I didn't even know you threw this in here because I came up with this just on the fly. I just really think this could be, good game for the defense. Let's go bear down or bear frown. Anthony Richardson will have 2 interceptions against the Bears. Dan, what do you got with this?
I'm going bear down as well. I think this is a game that you saw him in his last game. He threw 2 interceptions, only came in with 1 passing touchdown and maybe like 50 rushing yards. He didn't have an excellent week playing in Lambeau, so he is going to have a home game here. But I think this Bears defense is a lot scarier than the Packers defense is. So I do think we get 2 interceptions here. If it's not 2 interceptions, I think we get 2 turnovers regardless from Anthony Richardson.
I'm going bear down as well, man. Like I said before, I think there's going to be Jalen Johnson's going to get a second pick for the season, being one of the highest paid corners in the league, and maybe one of the safeties as well. I was trying to think of another name on top of it. It's either going to be Jaquan Brisker or Kyler Gordon. I think he's going to get another interception on Anthony Richardson. He's going to be wanting to throw in tight coverage. Bears defense is looking really well in coverage. Tyreek Stevenson did kind of get exposed this week, but Nico Collins is a great wide receiver. Let's not, steer clear from that, why he did get torched last week, but exactly. I'm going to go. Yeah, I think I'm going to go bear down. I think Anthony Richardson does throw 2 interceptions against the Bears.
All right. And so I always want to throw a little bit of a wild one in there, right? One that we don't necessarily think is going to happen. Well, one that you'd be very excited to hear about. So bear down or bear frown, Caleb scores not 1, but 2 touchdowns in week 3 against the Colts. What do we
Give me another bear down.
Give you another bear down.
The reason why I say this is because I think this is the Caleb revenge game, in my opinion. Everyone's flaming him on Twitter after the week 2 game. Offensive line not holding up. I think this offensive line is going to be like, we are better than the last place pressured team. There's teams out there like I'm trying to think of like teams on the fly. I think Denver has not a good offensive line. There's one key piece on Denver's offensive line that did get paid well. I believe it's their center. But I do think this could be the Caleb revenge game. I think that he gets 2 touchdowns in the game. I think that, he's going to have a great game. I'm not going to go out there and say 5 touchdowns, but I'm going to say 2. I think he gets 2 touchdowns during the game, 2 passing touchdowns. Maybe one could be a running touchdown, maybe on a bootleg. Another one could be a passing touchdown. I'm going to say maybe Rome Odunze, but I do think this could be the Caleb revenge game for last week. Yeah. I think he's pissed. He wants, to basically, prove the haters wrong. And I got that. What do you think, Dan?
I agree. I think he wants to fill that stat sheet. So I do think I'm going to say Bear frown, unfortunately, here. I do think him scoring twice is the dream for us right now.
Yeah,
I want to see him score once. I want to have him just see one passing touchdown. I think it's likely if he throws one passing touchdown in the first quarter, I think he throws two because I think his confidence level is going to be a little bit boosted there. But unfortunately, I'm going to say, Bear frown on this. I think Caleb scores once, and I think the rest of the game hopefully goes down to the run game. It's kind of what I'm thinking. But we got one more here, Tyler. You want to?
Yeah, the last one. So the way this should go, we both should have the same answer at this. Yeah. This offensive line we knew got torched in week 2, but bear down or bear frown. This offensive line allows less than 7 sacks to the Bears, which they did have in week 2.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think, Dan? Yeah,
bear down all the way.
I'm with you too as well. I'm going bear down.
How much worse can it get? I mean, we did have one game, 2 years ago, maybe it was last year, when in 2 weeks, I think Justin Fields got sacked 15 times, which means that there was a game with 7 sacks and a game with 8 sacks. I think this game he gets sacked less than 7 times. I think this game Caleb gets sacked, hopefully somewhere around 4. I think it's kind of the idea. I think the offensive line still struggles, but I think they don't have the same kind of pressures that they had last week coming from both sides, right? Will Anderson and Danielle Hunter. So I think that's a big uptick for us. I think the offensive line is going to get a little bit of a rest coming in this week. So yeah, less than 7 sacks for sure.
I'm going bear down as well with this one. If we give up 7 sacks against a team without DeForest Buckner, we have a huge problem with this offensive line, and changes need to be made immediately starting in week 4. If we have 7 sacks, that is way too much for Caleb. Eberflus said after the game, he is bruised up. He's bruised up. We saw those hits he was taking. Remember that sack where the Texans lineman came around, literally just jumped on him? You saw that where he literally tough. I was like, oh no, no injury. He got up a little slow, but clearly he's bruised up. He's banged up from that one. So I'm not saying he's not going to take 1 sack, but I could see him only taking maybe 2 to 3 sacks against the Colts without DeForest Buckner. Now the offensive line needs to realize that you did have a really bad week 2. You had a terrible week 2, and DeForest Buckner's out. Let's not get over. I don't think they're getting ahead of themselves, but let's not let the confidence go through the roof with Buckner out. We got to realize that we're bad. Let's just kind of keep us calm and collected.
Let's ride the wave, right? If we're going to be bad, then let's at least play excitingly. Let's play with a little bit of pizzazz. And I totally agree. I don't think the offensive line plays that bad this week. So I'd be very excited to see that. So that's our segment of bear down and bear frown. Let us know how much you enjoyed that in the comments. Obviously, it was a bit quick, but I do think we're going to go ahead and try to work with that in the future as well, because I think it's a bit fun, and there'll always be a couple new ones. But onto the next part here, we have 2 things left to cover. We're going to try to go as quickly as we can. We're just going to go over quickly the next 3 games for the Bears, because this looks like a little bit of an easier slate for us. Obviously, this week we have the Colts, who lost to Green Bay without their quarterback, so I think that's another good push in our direction. No DeForest Buckner. The week after, we get the Rams. The Rams, obviously, no Kupp and no Nakua. Obviously, they did have the loss of Aaron Donald this previous offseason, so he was a killer for the Bears. He definitely showed Justin Fields the ground several times during each game. So that would be nice for their offense, and our defense kind of again keeping that a low scoring game. So hopefully that can help with a win. And then after that, obviously the Panthers. Enough said. We're going to win that game. I can't tell you we'll lose that game.
Yeah, obviously the Colts are looking for a little bit of a revenge game as well, losing to the Packers on week 2. The Rams, on the other hand, they're out with Cooper Kupp for a few weeks. They're out with Puka Nakua for at least 6. I heard reports that he's out for a while. He's out for 5 weeks, 6 weeks.
Yeah.
But there are some big pieces on this Rams team. We'll just talk into it a little bit next week. Jared Verse did get drafted by this team. He's a great defensive end to help them out. And then the Panthers, they're going through a huge struggle right now. I don't know if you guys have saw the reports, but their number 1 pick overall last year, who got selected after the trade with the Bears, where they gave us all these assets, Bryce Young, is going to be benched for at least for the time being. We have no idea how long. And, former Bears quarterback and Bengals quarterback Andy Dalton is going to be under center for the Panthers. So let's not think about the Panthers. It's 100% victory. Andy Dalton's a decent quarterback. He did have a few wins with the Bears, and I think obviously we did say enough said, but we got to see how we perform this week.
Of course. It's going to take time. It's going to take some, presence being there and practicing and understanding that their defense isn't lackluster. Their defense can provide for most games, but I just sure hope that the Bears can be able to win at that moment in the year, because that would be pretty important for us. So
I agree.
But after that, that's our next 3 games that we have coming up. We're going to go over the stats that Caleb has right now and hopefully kind of make an idea by the time these next 3 games are over, what kind of stats we could think Caleb will have here. Caleb's stats so far after 2 games, he has 37 completions from 66 passes, so it's just over 50%, 267 yards, 0 touchdowns so far, 2 interceptions, and 10 carries for 59 yards. So it isn't beautiful. It's obviously just like you would expect a rookie to have. I think a lot of the other rookies in the league have very similar numbers, except, the interception rate is a little bit higher, or obviously in Jaden Daniels' case, the rush is extremely crazy. He's already hit almost 200 rushing yards this season. So, Tyler, my last question before we head off and give you guys the pleasure of watching a Week 3 Bears football game, what kind of stats do you think it needs to look like by the time it's hitting Week 6, right? So we've played Week 5. We're still waiting for Week 6 to play on. What kind of stats do you think Caleb needs to have in order to feel comfortable that he's progressing, he's becoming a better quarterback, and he's understanding the system that we have here?
This is a great question, Dan. Caleb, being the new quarterback for the Bears, it's a lot of pressure on him, and we need him to perform well. We did traded Justin Fields away for him to draft Caleb Williams number 1 overall. We could have gotten a little bit more assets for that number 1 pick, but we decided to go with Caleb. I know you went a little bit more in depth with this one. I'm just going to go 2 basic broad things for Caleb in over the next, I'd say 4 games. Let's go by week 6, week 7. He needs to at least, and it's hard to say this because not every quarterback can do this. He needs to at least have 1 touchdown a game. It could be a rushing touchdown. It could be a passing touchdown. We'd rather have it be in a passing touchdown so he doesn't get hurt. But I think he needs to get at least 1 touchdown per game. And then every game, he can't have more than 2 interceptions. If he has more than 2 interceptions or even 2 interceptions, it's just it's hard to grasp, in my opinion, being a fan. Just because I know some of our friends were, texting about, he's throwing in tight coverage and stuff, but he's trying to scramble and get these to the 1 open receiver that he can find because he finally didn't get sacked on that play. But I think, 2 interceptions is too much. If he gets 1 interception, okay. We saw the statistics with how Peyton Manning was his rookie year, but I think that basically let's just try to get 1 touchdown a game for Caleb Williams and no more than 2 interceptions per game. That's what I'm going to say. Go basically for every single game. I know you have kind of what you want to see after 6 games, but I want you to go into that. What do you think for after 6 games?
Within the next 3 games, obviously after going over the stats that he's right now, I think after the next 3 games that we see here, right, 5 games total played, I would love to see 100 completions. So it's pretty much double to what he has right now compared to the 37. And I would love to see 100 completions.
It's possible. That's normal, 100%
right?
possible.
That's just a little bit of over 20 a game, right? Just a smidge over 20 a game. I wanted to see 800 yards, right? 800 yards is a little bit more on the difficult side, seeing that he threw for 95 week 1. But 800 yards compared to his 260, if you round it up to 300, we're talking over 170 yards per game. So similar to what he got this last game. I think it's totally doable. I think we're talking Justin Fields range with someone that doesn't have the same accuracy as Caleb. So I think Caleb can easily hit that benchmark, even go over. I think this is the good one. This is 3 to 5 touchdowns, 3 to 5 mainly just passing touchdowns. I would love to see that. I think 5 is on the crazier end, seeing that he hasn't thrown 1 yet. I would think 3 to 5 touchdowns is definitely doable in this stretch that we see here. I think teams that, definitely is going to be in the mid-range scoring. I think we're going to see about a lot of 40-point games in these next few weeks. And then I want to see under 6 interceptions. I'm not going to say that he's going to go, pound for pound on the interception total compared to his touchdowns. Like he's not going to go 5 for 5 or 5 for 4. I do think there's a chance that he has more interceptions than touchdowns, but I'm just hoping he keeps that under 6, right? At least once a week. I don't want to see him throwing 2, right? I think throwing 1 a game is just enough of a mistake to keep his confidence up. If he throws 2, then I'm worried about his confidence. I'm worried about how strong he's going to continue playing. But that's it. That's all I got. And honestly, Caleb, I believe in you. I still hope that you're just there. You're focused. Your mentality is about winning next week. There's not much we can do as Bears fans other than root for you. But at the end of the day, what else can we do? Unfortunately, Caleb, we have to, give you advice once in a while on what it's like to play in this league as a Bears player, but hopefully you figure it out in time. And I think this week is going to be a big week. I am definitely rooting for you.
Yeah. We did, kind of talk about the last quarterback we had, Justin Fields. He didn't start off good as well. He had a lot of flaws as well. I know our buddies were like, why did we get rid of Fields and stuff like that? This is week 2. Like, we got to realize this, it's only week 2. We just played the Texans, which are a huge football team. They have a great offense. Week 1, we skimmed by just because of our defense. Caleb will get it. Caleb did it at USC. He barely had like good weapons at the USC, line, and he ended up managing pretty well. I still believe in him. I still believe in him until he's still on our team, and he's our franchise quarterback. He's going to do well. It just give him a little bit. Let's give him a little bit more protection. Let's get him, his receivers out there. Let's get the running game going to build his confidence. And it'll work out in the long run for Bears fans. It will.
Definitely. Yeah, thank you guys for sticking around for one of the long ones we had this week. We'll try to keep it maybe roughly an hour when we do further podcasts during the week when it comes to, week 4 recap, week 5 recap. We'll go over the game that we previously all watched together, and then kind of some stat lines going into the next week. But thank you guys for sticking around. It's been
we appreciate it. Yeah, like we said, we always appreciate the watching and the listens. We always, you guys always throw in the comments if you ever like have a opinion or if you disagree with us. But we're gonna try to get these podcasts combined with the preview and then the recap of the previous week as well, just to kind of not do 2 podcasts a week, just to make it easy on your guys' end to try to watch and listen. But it's also easier on our end, so we don't have to try to figure everything out for 2 days in a row. We both work right now, so we're gonna try to we get everything kind of rolling. We're excited, obviously get our recaps with all the Bears games with you. We love talking about, Caleb and the Bears, and, even if it's, a bad game like week 2, we love to, dissecting what went wrong and like figuring out, what the Bears can do to improve in the future. So,
Exactly. Yeah. All we do is hope for the best.
Yeah, we appreciate it, guys. Tune in week 3 next week with our recap as well. Week 3 also, I was going to say tune in week 3. Bears taking on the Colts at noon. Indianapolis should be a Caleb revenge game. Bears defense should take over as well, and we're excited to watch as well. And it's going to be a fun Sunday. So, all right, guys. Yeah, we appreciate
Thank you so much, guys.
Enjoy your Wednesday. Enjoy your week, and as always, bear down.
Bear down, guys. See ya.